So basically you're asking, is Corona a super stressor on relationships in particular, or was there another alternative to that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess my question is like, do you feel like with all the changes that are going on, like in life, this is like a big question, like with all the changes that I think culturally, societally, we're seeing, like, do you think the notion of people being married is a hard concept to sell in the future? And Corona just like, people are like, I'm stuck with you, I'm fucking, like, I don't want to deal with it, right? Like, it was like, it created more of a pressure cooker, it like made it worse? Or do you feel like people are just getting divorced because of the stress of Corona? Does that make sense? Like,
I think so. I mean, I think that whether or not it's sort of, there's sort of a few different questions nested within that. I would say, I think that Corona slash any sort of pandemic that's going to be bringing about quarantine, I think it's really quarantine in particular, not Corona specifically, that can be a unique stressor on any sort of familial bonds and relationships whenever you're living in close quarters, even with a roommate. That sort of stress is very unique and hopefully not something that's going to become a normal, thing or way of life going forward. But I will say that, obviously in a healthy relationship, it's also healthy to have space from your partner. You want to have some of your own interests, your own life. You don't want to just become codependent where you are sort of a unit that only functions together out in the world. It's healthy to have some separation, some interests, and that also allows space for desire. So it's a really important dynamic and element of a healthy relationship. And in quarantine, particularly for those people who are in very close quarters, working from home, perhaps having to also reshuffle their chores, their dynamics with raising kids, with homeschooling. These are all new responsibilities that have to figure out, you have to figure out roles and who's going to be tackling those and what's fair and what feels appropriate and right. And on top of that, you have these additional outside stressors of, economic stressors. Is someone being laid off? Is somebody suddenly working remotely when they've never done that before, and finding it to be really difficult for various reasons? Are they really worried about being able to put food on the table or take care of their kids or feed their kids? Or just, childcare, is a huge stressor. So there's so many things that have cropped up from all of this that I think can definitely put a unique strain on a relationship, but also just, on humans in close quarters.
100%. But like, you're so right. But like, I'm thinking for myself, like, I'm recently divorced. Well, we recently divorced, but we're like roommates still. Like, we live in a house, and it's like totally
Hmm.
cool. Like, Carrie, my co-parent, is really good about boundaries. So like,
Yeah,
like she's really good at like, like I have to ask to enter the room and stuff. Um,
right.
so that's been really helpful. Like in that regards, like I hear you, but it's like I'm so curious, like too, as I get back on in like the uh, mindset of like, okay, maybe there is someone out there for me. Like it's hard not to walk out of divorce and go, fuck it, I'm not doing that again, right?
Hmm.
What is in contrast? Is there like a silver lining that like? Do you ever feel like bogged down with like all the people that you work with as a divorce coach? Like, do you ever feel like, oh my god, like we are doomed to not be in relationships, or maybe just some people are not relational and that's great. Some people are like, what is like, do you ever get down? Like, do you ever get like, fuck it, what's the point?
Yeah, it's really funny. A lot of people ask me that, like if I'm jaded, perhaps because I'm exposed to this so much. And honestly, I think that for me, at least, going through the experience myself, I I definitely felt that way initially. I was in that cohort that was like, I'm never getting married again. I'm never doing all this again. And I want to say within a year or two, I reframed pretty quickly to being the type of person who never says never. Because I think that, so many different possibilities can rise and people change, for better or for worse. yourself included. And so I think that also as you grow, your perspective can change. But I would say that, going through it myself, that I think did affect me for a while, in terms of feeling that jaded, feeling that doomed, complex, like I was gonna be alone for the rest of my life. And honestly, though, working with clients has not had that impact on me at all. I think that every person's situation is so unique. Everyone's circumstances are so unique. And even of my clients, some of them, if you were to ask them right now, some would say, no, I'm never getting married again, whether or not they actually will in the future. That's where they're at right now. Others would say, oh yeah, like I would totally get married again. I want to get married again. Like that's the plan. So it really varies. And it's because there's so many different things at play. Human relationships are so complicated and complex, and it can sometimes just be as simple as you still care about each other. You're not necessarily, at each other's throats, but you're just on different paths. And it's like, it's almost a beautiful acceptance of that, and tribute to that when you're able to say, I care about you. I want you to be happy. Same with me. Like, but that's going to necessitate this sort of legal uncoupling to
Do you see
clear
a
the
lot of
path.
those? Do you see a lot of those where it's like I remember when we decided last year in July, they're like, okay, like I was like, I get it. She'd been
Hmm.
on board for a while, but I was like, okay, I get it. Like I'm with you. I see what you're
Yeah.
saying. All right, love you. Bye. I mean, even though we stayed roommates, just out of necessity,
Yeah.
financial, and with our child. But do you see a lot of those? A lot of those like conscious uncouplings?
I mean, I see a lot of everything, to be honest. I don't know if I should I can't, it's hard to put it all in one bucket. And it's also difficult because I only work with one member of a couple, going through a divorce. So as much as, they might paint me a picture that's, yeah, we're on the same page, we both want this. I don't necessarily know what that other person's perspective is. So I can say that, yeah, I mean, a number of my clients, they seem to be in mutual agreement. Oftentimes though, there's one person who wants it more than the other in terms of the divorce and moving forward with the divorce.
Kim, that just blew my mind. I'm like, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. I was not expecting to say this out loud, and I did not expect to make this realization. But this is so I'm working with a relationship coach now. Like I'm working with people and stuff on trying to like unleash the beast of sorts, like in a good way,
Okay.
not in a bad way. I mean the beast, but like the beast left years ago. But like I mean like in a good way where I'm like confident, right? But I'm like I bought. Here's what I. So similar to you, where you're like you're hitting the one side. I bought in, and I think it was the right decision. I bought into her story, and I was like, "Oh, I'm a piece of
Mm.
shit. Like I'm horrible." And that, like, and she, like, now a lot of times, she's like, no, you're not. Like, you weren't. It's just, it's different paths, you know. But I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, but I was a dick. Like, I was terrible, you know. Like, in terms of what we had set up to do, or like how we
Hmm.
came together. So it's like, it's funny. Like, I think a big part. I'm sharing like a big part that's holding me back. I think from like it was so bold. Like I when you said that you have clients that are like, yeah, it's part of the plan. I was like, "Ooh, that's
Yeah.
bold!" Like they're that strong.
Yeah.
Like they're ready to give it. With me, I'm like, I still feel like I'm a horrible person for getting a divorce. You know what I mean? Like I
Hmm.
feel like I messed it up. Like I suck. Right? Does that?
Aw.
Do you see people like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, well, and it's not necessarily that they're owning the blame for it, but I see a lot of people who are wrapped up in shame, around their divorce, or feeling like either they somehow failed, or at least their marriage failed, and they know that they're sort of a part owner in that. And when you're sort of fixated on that and taking that perspective, while it might have some elements of truth to it, there are other perspectives that also have some elements of truth to them. And so what I like to do is help clients adopt a more empowering perspective on their divorce, and one that will really serve them going forward. So how can you start to reframe the divorce as as an opportunity, as a chance for growth, as a chance for, learning for both of you. Like, how can you both become not only better versions of yourself going forward, maybe better parents, better models for your kids, and models of what love is or can look like, better models of what marriage can look like. But also, what kind of partner do you want to be going forward? And really thinking about that, how can you start to cultivate, yourself as a better partner and learn from that experience? And I think that if you really focus on it that way, as a learning, opportunity, to be seized and to be kind of taken advantage of, then I think it can just serve you more so, because sitting there and beating yourself up, or just repeating kind of to yourself, like, I failed, or the marriage failed, it's not really going to serve you. It's not really going to, fix anything going forward or help you not repeat a same mistake if there was a mistake. And it's all perspective anyway. So
I think
that's sort of my belief.
you're so positive, like, and it's so cool. And I want to dive into like your story, but like I have to say, as you're saying this, I'm like, I think the biggest failure that I feel, even though I wasn't the one that made, I wasn't the one who made the decision. I mean, it was a good decision. It was the right decision for everyone. It was the smart thing to do. But I feel like I failed my daughter. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I failed my child in creating this utopian childhood that I wanted her to have, where she doesn't have any sniffles or boo-boos, or, and it's like,
Yeah.
like my parents, like growing up, like they fought all the time. They're still together, God bless them. But like, they were fought, like screaming and, all the time. And
Right.
I was like, she doesn't have that. Like, she has two parents that are
Mm-hmm.
friends. Like, we're generally friends. Like, we hang out, like we talk, like whenever she lets us talk.
Yeah.
But we, the three of us go for walks and stuff. So it's like that feeling of like, I failed her though. It's still deep.
Mm. Well, again, that's I can't help but play the coach, but that's a story. That's one story that you're telling yourself. But an alternative narrative that I would invite you to consider, perhaps, is, what if you're showing her how to overcome challenges and obstacles in her life? Because as much as you might want to, you could be the perfect parent. And honestly, I don't know if it would actually serve her to keep her in a bubble, in a protected bubble, and never let her experience pain or suffering. Because then, if she finally at some point goes into the world and experiences adversity or some sort of awful relationship challenge in her own life, how is she going to be prepared to deal with that? What sort of, models or growth experiences will she have had to kind of look to? And so I'm not saying, it's a medium. Like, there are always trade-offs, and you don't want to throw your child into the furnace of hell and have her exposed to just awful fighting and conflict just to show her how to get through it. But at the same time, it is a balance, and you don't also want to keep your child completely protected, unexposed to anything. And so, again, a reframing there I would offer would be that you can show her that a divorce isn't the end of the world. A breakup isn't the end of the world. These things happen, just like with death. You can't protect her from experiencing loss in her life at some point, but you do have the opportunity to show her how to handle it, or some tools and techniques that you found beneficial in handling it and processing that grief. And similarly, the grief of a divorce, is a good opportunity to show her how to get through that. And also then to show her, going forward, what love looks like or can look like. Because sometimes when parents do stay together for the kids, they're kind of by virtue of that, they're modeling some unhealthy relationship dynamics or communication dynamics, or just modeling for them a version of marriage that doesn't necessarily have to be the ideal. And so those are just some alternatives that I'd offer up again.
You're so kind. Like, you have so much humility, which is cool, because you work in such a heightened thing, I bet. Like, do you have people coming to you prior to the divorce where they're like, they want to stay together almost, but like, just because of everything you talked about, where it's like they're so committed to the idea of it and they feel like if they move forward, it would be a failure, and then like they can't see past. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, it does. So yeah, I mean, it would only be one person coming to me early on like that. Because again, I don't work with couples, because I don't have any sort of background in therapy or counseling. And so I always like to draw that out as a distinction. However, I do have people coming to me early on, and they're usually just don't have quite the clarity, that they definitely want to stay together, or they definitely want to move forward with divorce. And that's often the case. I mean, usually there's some doubts. And so what I'll often do, if it's possible, like if they haven't yet tried certain things like couples counseling and their partner is open to that, I would 100% recommend trying that. I mean, what's the risk of trying couples counseling or trying some, therapy for either of you, if not both? But additionally, I'll help clients really just with some questions, like unpacking some questions. What do they really need to change in their life in order for them to be happy? And is there any way that they could get those needs met while avoiding divorce? Are there different options on the table? Because although I work as a consultant and coach in the divorce space, if I can prevent someone from going through the pain and difficult, process of a divorce, that would be the preference, because it's sort of my view that no one really wins in a divorce, maybe apart from the divorce attorney, since they're getting paid. But yeah, it's just a really rough process to go through. And if it's possible to talk things out or salvage the relationship, then I think that would be the preference. So I'll help my clients kind of guide them through a self-inquiry, help them get some clarity, help them make sure they're in a place where they're able to take care of themselves to make effective decisions, so that they're not going to do something that they regret.
and that's such a powerful distinction. You're right. So many people in the industry. I remember when we were working with we did a mediator who's awesome, and we worked with a mediator, and it was just and she said to us, she's like, at first she's like, okay, I'm so sorry, but this will take about 4 or 5 sessions, and
Right.
We'll go through it. And then after the first discussion with us, she's like, okay, so I have everything I need. She's like, this is the easiest divorce I've ever done. I'll see you guys in a few months. Like, and they did the paperwork. But when Carrie and I were filling out the paperwork, we're like, wow, when you really see like what it means to dissolve the contract, we were like, this could go south so quickly. Like, not with us, but like thank God it didn't. Like for us, it was a very clean break. We had nothing going into it. Like, we had prenups, all this stuff, but still, it was all about the child, and it was all about like taking care of her and everything. But oh my God, we could see where this stuff goes crazy. So it's cool that you create that distinction of like, you're not pushing as a divorce coach. You're not like,
oh no,
pushing in that direction. Was this like so? And again, I know a lot of people right now too that are in therapy and they're working. For us too, I want to throw this out there. Therapy, we went to 2 sessions, and I was like listening to her, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, we're done. I was like, we're not right for each other, but and that we saved the friendship, like we saved the relationship because of that. And I was like, I see like converging different directions. But was this like your goal? Like, you're 16, 17 years old, and you're like, man, I'm going to be a divorce coach. No, right? Like, you had a completely different path.
Yeah.
What was your path?
No, it's so true. I mean, I would be really surprised if I ever met someone. I mean, I guess actually, now that I think about it, I have encountered some coaches or some people who work in the divorce space, who felt called to it because their parents had a really rocky divorce, or they had a loved one who went through the process, and so that was their calling. No, for me, my parents are happily married, and I'm probably rare at this point that I was not a child of divorce, and it was something that I never anticipated I would go through either. I mean, who does? but yeah. So no, let's see, my life path. It's always hindsight is 2020. So I wouldn't say that I had it all that clearly mapped out necessarily, but no, my background, I studied business in undergrad. I loved the idea of studying business because my whole family were coming from the medical kind of industry. So my parents are both physicians. My brother is also, he's in residency to be a medical doctor. My sister's a veterinarian. And so I'm literally like the black sheep of the family. But if you haven't noticed already, most professionals, if we're talking doctors, lawyers, like the traditional professions, don't have a ton of business acumen, and it's not their fault. They just aren't educated at all when it comes to business and told how to run a practice, how to handle finances. And so that was something I witnessed early on, and that was sort of what keyed me up to look at business and consider, maybe I could help my family if I knew some of this. So I studied business, and then after undergrad, I decided to go to law school and also get my MBA, so do a dual degree, not with the intention actually of practicing law, but I saw the law degree having a lot of utility in the business world. It would give me some optionality in terms of, just being able to hopefully start my own business and like know how to do it with savvy. But also maybe some access to investment if I needed that, having the credibility of a law degree and having the connections that it can afford, I saw being beneficial. And really just knowing the ins and outs of the legal system as an entrepreneur, because I liked the idea of being an entrepreneur, even though I had no idea what I wanted to do or build.
But even
so
like with contracts, like even with contracts and paper, like I think it's so smart, like just having that background so that you can implement so many like better systems in place prior to starting even the business.
It's definitely very useful. I will, 100%. And so, so that was my sort of plan, at least going into things. I did consider practicing law because I found that while I was in law school, I was very drawn to entrepreneurial law. So basically advising startups or entrepreneurs. And contracts and all of that good stuff, and corporation, and also transactional intellectual property. So basically everything except patents, like copyright, trademark law, all of that was fascinating to me, loved it. And so thought about going that route, but ultimately did go business. But when I was coming out of graduate school, not only, I found a great business job, was finally done all my education, and I, at the same time, married my partner of 7 years soon after graduating. And so, I took a job in the business world. Things were going great. And in just a year and a half, I found myself in a situation where my marriage was completely imploding around me. And so that completely rocked my world. I mean, I fortunately had a job, had some stability in my life. But that event was something that I did not see coming, despite having been in a relationship with him for 9 years. Never saw it coming, never would have anticipated it. And it really threw me for a loop, kind of in every possible way. And so in the ensuing years, do you have a question?
I like, oh my God, like I'd say that was heartbreaking because when you're talking about law, like your eyes were like so wide and open and you were like you're like, I'm in my zone. And then to get sideswiped, do you feel comfortable like talking about that? What instigated that? Like that has to be a loss of identity like no tomorrow because this thing is happening away from you. What happened?
So true. So true. So definitely a huge loss of identity. Basically he was my best friend. Like he knew me better than anyone else in the world, I can say with confidence. And I thought I knew him better than anyone else in the world. But it came as a shock. There was a lot that was going on behind the scenes with him that I was not privy to. And without going into too many details, because I don't want to disparage him or, that isn't my goal. There was another woman in the picture. There was stuff going on behind the scenes that, again, I just didn't know about. And so when it hit me, it really knocked me out, and hard. And it was only a year and a half post marriage. So it was also something that seemed to like unravel really fast for me. But it was a situation where I'd been with him since I was 19. So I was 28 when I was getting divorced, and I really had no idea who I was as a functioning adult in the world without him by my side. He had, for better or worse, really shaped the person that I had become. And I honestly, in a lot of ways, I'm very grateful for that. I think that in general, like we had a really great relationship, or we wouldn't have been together for 9 years. But again, things, even if they seem good, sometimes things change and you can't control it. And so that was definitely an area where I had to do so much rebuilding and personal discovery and reflection and figuring out what I wanted now, independent of him, independent of our relationship. And it was a lot of soul searching and a lot of work and self-development.
I can't imagine at that age, because like I had just met Carrie, my co-parent. I just met her when I was 29, and at that time
Mm-hmm.
I was still in graduate school. Like I couldn't
Right.
imagine. But there's something more intense about once you lock it down as a marriage, right? Like it's one thing to have a devastating breakup, like we've all had those, but
Mm-hmm.
with marriage, it's like it's on such a deeper level in terms of like you walking around with the ring. You're like, I am
Yeah.
this. It's like it seems
Mm-hmm.
like it's finite. There's a fucking legal document that says like we are joined,
Oh,
right? So,
totally. Well, and especially I was in the boat of I chose to change my name when I got married. I was a little conflicted about that, but that also has identity implications. And I don't think it's something that we talk about a lot, but for me, that was really impactful because I had earned multiple degrees with my pre-marriage name. And I was in the working world, and developing my professional reputation. And so to have that shift in identity and have the name also be a part of that, I think that that's also, it can be traumatic in a very odd way.
Carrie, my co-parent, is along these lines. Like Carrie, my co-parent, she kept the last name
Mm-hmm.
because she is a woman of color, and
Mm-hmm.
we have a daughter who, I mean, our daughter is mixed, but
Yeah.
she, because I'm fucking I'm like pale, like incandescent, like Casper over here. Our daughter is like, like leans towards Caucasian. Like if you really look at her, you can see that it's not the case. But Carrie, that was something that we discussed, and she's like, "Can I keep the last name? Because I want to have the same last name as her, because
Mm-hmm.
we know there's a lot of disparity, there's like with
Oh,
racism, and she could,
yeah.
you're not this kid's mom, and so it's like she's an amazing mom. So yeah, like the name thing, but again, like I was like really proud of that. I was like, yeah, like for sure, like keep it, like it's
Yeah.
not, I don't feel like it's mine to own, but people like, but that name thing is a crazy shift. Like, what was it
It's
weird?
hard.
Were you used to signing your name as?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was very weird. I mean,
Oh,
because when I got married, I was 26, which it's funny because at the time I felt really old. I was like, I'm old. I can totally get married. Yeah. I waited plenty long, and yeah.
you're
And
a grown
now in
up. You're a grown up.
retrospect, I'm like, that was pretty young still. But yeah, I mean, after you've lived, a quarter of your life if you're going to be 100, but like a lot of your life, signing your name a certain way, viewing yourself a certain way, to suddenly change your last name like that. I know it's hard for oftentimes for men to relate to, because you just can't imagine doing it. But it's very weird. And actually, my parents, they when they got married, they both changed their name. They came up with a completely, so West is a completely made up last name that happens to be my last name, but they both changed their name. So I'm sure that they on some level both experienced that dissonance of identity, and like, okay, this is strange to no longer be that person after being that person for so much of your life. And obviously in some ways, like on deeper levels, you're still the same person, but it is funny how something like that can affect how you view yourself.
Well, like it solidifies that you're part of a team, right? And that's like a hard
Yeah.
thing. Like that's a hard thing for me to understand. Like I'm sorry to keep bringing it back to me. I'm just like, this
No.
is like really cool. Like a process, Um,
Yeah.
I hope it's okay. Um,
Of course.
I joke that like, man, last year was like super rough. I mean, obviously in contrast to 2020, like Jesus, like,
Yeah.
um, but but last year was rough. I got divorced and I did a musical, and
Mm.
that was the musical fucked me out. Like that was hard, like because I have a hard time being on teams. And there you're like,
Uh-huh.
like as a performer, I'm used to. I'll do shows with my friends, but like we do variety shows. It's like everyone does
Yeah.
their set. Last
Okay.
year, the destruction of me being part of a unit, me being part of a
Hmm.
collective, me and Carrie,
Yeah.
which is like even weird for me to say now. Like, oh yeah, that was a thing. Like I forgot. I'm like, Karen and I were, yeah. But like, I went from that to having to sing and act with other people, and it was very
Mm-hmm.
jarring, like it was so jarring because
Mm-hmm.
of that notion of like I am by myself now. Like I have to carry myself by myself in amidst these group of other artists who are so like they were so talented. Like every
Yeah.
single I couldn't believe it. Like everyone is so talented in the show. And but it's like, yeah, like I didn't address it. I didn't think about it in those terms of like it was hard for me to show up and be part of a team in general, but
Mm-hmm.
especially it was like heightened when the team that I knew for 10 years like completely snapped. Like how did you build out of that? Like how did you, because you're saying like 9 years, those are big, 19 to 20, those are big developmental years. Like how
Yeah,
did you
no
start
doubt.
building a new identity?
Whew, yeah. So a lot of the time, what naturally comes to mind is how are you going to trust people again when you have such a massive level of what can feel like a betrayal in your life on some level. Oftentimes, honestly, it's not actually a personal thing. It's like it probably wasn't about me. Like in terms of him, he wasn't trying to hurt me by doing anything that he did. It wasn't, even though I took it very personally at the time, and might have interpreted it that way. It all in most cases, it isn't about the other person. It's about them and they're feeling pain and struggling, and so taking certain actions accordingly. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. But the idea
No, that's
basically
huge.
being,
That's a good point.
yeah,
Because
no,
like oh sorry.
it's valid. Go for it. Yeah, you
So
can jump
I
in.
have this like not like I have this perception of you, Kim, from like, we met, we spoke, and like even now,
Hmm.
like the way like you are such a kind spirit. Like you are and you're so accomplished, like you're so good at what you do. You're such a caring person. Like in my head, I'm like, why would, but I know that I've like as a guy, like and I know that like I've been intimidated as hell by that. Like where, and I don't know that I was consciously ever trying to tear someone down, but like I felt less than, right? Like Karen, my co-parent, is brilliant, like brilliant.
Hmm.
And I felt less than a lot of times, and I probably acted out certain ways.
Sure.
And so I could see, but that had nothing to do with her is the point. It has nothing to do with you. It's like, but we take it in, you're like, you absorb it and you're like, but it's being directed towards me. Like I'm the one getting like let go of in this
Completely.
thing. And yeah, so it's like, I feel it breaks my heart that someone like on your quality level, I'm just like, whoa.
No, I mean, well, first of all, I'm 35 now. I was 28 then, and I've done so much work on myself at this point. So I'm not saying I was an awful person then at all, but at the same time, I'm a different person today than I was then. And also, I mean, they're two people. It's a dynamic. It's not in a vacuum. And just, you could have, even in an idealized world, you could have like a perfect person to be in a relationship with. And it doesn't mean that they're the perfect person for everybody. Or that that you share goals or that you're on the same page with things. There can always be issues that arise. But I'm trying to remember what your original question was. Oh, the identity work. So what I was going to say is that we often get fixated on how are we going to trust someone else again, when actually I think that the first question, and maybe the more important question, is how are you going to trust yourself again? We often lose trust in ourselves as a part of these breakups because we often question, what didn't I see? What did I miss? What were the red flags that I should have spotted? What mistakes did I make? How can I trust myself not to do this again or end up in a similar situation again? There's so many questions and so many self judgments that we make. And so I think that our trust in ourselves often gets broken as a part of this process. And that needs to be built and rebuilt first and foremost, to have a solid foundation. And it goes to that, you need to heal before you start dating again. You need to figure out, get clarity on who you are, what you want, what you ideally want in a partner. Like really get clear on that before you start just, jumping out there and just messing with people's hearts, including your own. There's a lot of repair that needs to be done. And I mean, that's just a piece of it. There's a lot that can be done on the identity work side, in terms of exploration, trying new hobbies, new activities, really looking at, where do you want to live in the country or in the world? What are your goals in life? Like resetting and reevaluating from a clean slate, which is something that, again, not everyone has the chance to do. That's where divorce is an actual opportunity for people. And granted, when kids are in the mix, that's different. There are some boundaries there. But at the same time, you suddenly are in a situation where you no longer have to really deeply consider that other person in a lot of life decisions, if not all life decisions, if you don't have kids together. And so that can be really liberating and empowering, but it's kind of like with great power comes great responsibility, the whole Spider-Man quote, Stan Lee. That idea is true. Like, it's, you have this opportunity. So do you want to approach it conscientiously and intentionally and curate your life from the driver's seat? Or do you want to kind of be the passenger and just like coast along? And yeah, that can be dangerous.
Kim, you just went from like the coolest to the coolest. Like, look, you were like the Spider-Man quote, and then you did like you cited Stan Lee. Like that's brilliant.
Dude, you have to cite him. He was amazing.
Elsie, are you a fan? Are you a comic book fan?
Oh yeah, Stan Lee was amazing. He hung out with one of my friends in Boston. They went to a Playboy party together.
Oh
yeah,
my God.
He's a really cool dude. Really cool dude.
Oh,
May he rest
man.
in peace.
Yeah, that's God. I have to tell you. So I have I don't know if you can see it. I can't. Like I have a Superman tattoo. I'm like a big.
Okay.
Like I'm gonna do this on the show here. Like so I have like I'm like
cool.
a huge fan of Superman. I have a Superman shrine. I'm a big fan. But I have to confess that like I had this conversation with myself last night. These are the conversations I have with, like in the midst of Corona. My daughter and I were watching the X-Men cartoon, like from the 90s, which is so good. Have you ever seen it?
I actually haven't.
Oh.
Like, well, you mean like growing up? Like, well, actually, I probably have seen little clips of it when I was a kid. But yeah.
So we were watching
I haven't really watched it, but yeah.
Well, it's on Disney Plus. It's heavenly.
Okay.
So it's just such good like television. It's good writing. It's excellent. Good storytelling. So I was like, man, I like really. I think I just really do like Marvel so much better.
Marvel
like,
versus DC. Yeah.
I'm like, I know like Batman, like he's so dark and miserable. Like I'm like a positive person. Like I like Green Lantern, Flash, but like
totally. Have you watched any of the Lego movies, like Lego Batman? Because
they get it.
It plays on that really well.
I didn't know you were like. I didn't know you were into this stuff. That's amazing. Like you live in that. It's so funny.
It's great. It's so funny.
The Lego movies are really good though, because we watch them.
Oh, they're amazing. And that song gets stuck in my head though. Everything is awesome song.
Do you see the Lego 2 movie where it's like this song gonna get stuck inside?
Yes. Yes, exactly.
And it does. It delivers on the promise. It gets stuck.
It does.
And this goes along the lines of with the kid.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's funny. It's like with the kid, I think that was a huge fear was like, oh, like when it was like we're nearing the edge and we're like, wow, we're really going to jump forth and do this. What is that? Like I keep saying, like, what does that look like for the kid and everything? And it ended up that like the first week that we decided to part ways, she stayed with a friend of hers, was going out of town. So she, like her and our daughter went, or she and her, I don't know if you know, Carrie and our daughter went to stay for like a week and a half or something. It's like house sit. And so we had that like, and then they came back and we're still roommates, but like we had that separation and it was like, oh, like our daughter was thriving, like she didn't care because she had 2 days a week, just all of daddy's attention, 2 days a week, mama's attention. One day was all of us together. Whatever. Yeah. And so like, I want to tie this into like watching. So it's like, like my daughter fortunately loves superheroes too. I'm a big fan of superheroes. She loves superheroes. And it's like, I have to remember that like our relationship is our relationship. Like, so so even though I'm like having this conversation yesterday about like Marvel versus DC in my head, like I'm still there doing something collectively with her that we really enjoy. We went shopping yesterday. Like, and so it's like, there can still be, I guess, like what I'm processing is like going along with what you're saying about how when there's that that opportunity arises to do what you want to do, and to like,
Yeah.
you can still involve, right, like your kids within that. Like, it doesn't
Oh,
mean,
totally.
right, like, this took me a while to work this out just now, but I was like, yeah, like, I did have a mindset of like, man, if this was just a breakup, like, and there was no child, like, I would probably move back to Chicago for a little bit, or
Hmm.
and go do theater in Chicago or something, or, but like, I love Colorado. I love my business. I love the amazing women I work with. But yeah, like, my first impulse is, I don't get to do it because it's like I'm beholden to a child. It's like, no, that's not true. Like, you can
Hmm.
still craft your own life with this little being. Um,
Yeah.
so like, how did you then go along in the path of discovering your process for coaching?
Ooh, that's maybe that's been an ongoing thing, I think, a longer thing. Um, yeah, and again, that like almost speaks to the Steve Jobs quote about the connecting the sort of stars, the points in your life, and being only able to do that in retrospect. So I think that a piece of it has been my journey, my personal journey, that led me to what I do because I saw the need for it. So basically, coming from a legal background, I'm able to sort of provide consulting on that side of things to help people understand the roadmap, what to expect, what options they have to better navigate the process, what red flags to look out for, issues, that I've seen that they should know. Um, and so that piece is big. Obviously, my personal experience in navigating the process and feeling the pain and the empathy and knowing what the spikes are and how it just plays out in general. That's something that I feel very personally tied to. And so I like to be able to serve my clients and be there for them constantly, in terms of a person in their corner, someone who's always there for them that they can turn to, that isn't going to be, writing down like the time that I'm spending with them and billing them for it, because it's not how I operate. But yeah, and in terms of the coaching specifically, I actually benefited myself from working with a life coach, maybe about a year and a half after my divorce. And it was something that had not really been on my radar, at all. And so it was gifted to me originally. It was a really generous gift that I received. And then I loved it. I found it so beneficial to help me with that identity work, helping me to figure out, who I was, what I wanted, what I cared about, what sort of vision did I have for my life. And then it also was experience of having friends start to come to me and say, in their early 30s now, they were looking at divorcing and really unsure of what to do, what not to do, how to move forward. How did I survive my own experience? So they'd start to turn to me and just ask me, my 2 cents, having been through it myself. And so it reminded me, when I had been going through the process, that I really needed more support than I was getting, in terms of not just a divorce attorney, not just a therapist, but someone who could warn me about all of these pieces of the process and things that I hadn't been told, tax consequences of things, that stuff that happened post divorce that I just didn't realize. I thought that once the decree was issued, I was squared away and in the free and clear. That's not the case. Like, there's more to do. I wish I'd had someone there who could tell me all of that. And so that's what I wanted to be for other people. So ultimately, when I got my coaching certification, that was my purpose, my vision, my driving sort of need in life, was to fill that role for others, to be sort of their Sherpa through the divorce process, but also, one with a law degree, like one that could warn them, like, this is what it's going to look like in your state, because I work with clients nationwide, and how to prepare for it, what to expect, how to go into a mediation session, all of those sorts of things that you'd almost want from, if you would have sister who went through a divorce, that's me. Like, that's the person I want to be for you.
It's so funny. I work with so many people as a coach, as a coach. I work with so many people that are transitioning from therapy to coaching, or from financial planning to whatever it, like all sorts of different industries to coaching. And, and I know even myself going from teaching to coaching, like which I love coaching way more than teaching, but so many people walk in with this, like, I hear this from some people, like this imposter syndrome of like, I don't have the degrees, I don't have this or that. Oh, who am I to teach this or credibility there? And then it's like, you didn't have that, right? Like you had a law degree, like you have the certification, like you have like the experience, like you are legit as hell.
Well, so the counter I would have to that is I did still have imposter syndrome. It just was different, a different form of it. What was tough for me was, especially when I was getting started, because I started my business a handful of years ago. Now it's I kind of joke about this, but like you walk down the street and you trip over like 5 coaches. Like there are so many coaches now. And I honestly think that's great because we can all benefit from coaching. But when I was starting, it wasn't really a thing. And for me, coming from the more buttoned up professional world, having a law degree, having most of my colleagues be attorneys, or, busy working professionals, to suddenly say, hey, I'm a divorce consulting coach. It was a little jarring, like, again, kind of an identity like crisis, going from something, in a more buttoned up world and suddenly holding yourself out that way. It was a little tough. Like, I think that those who knew me understood, but I'm sure there were a lot of people who were like blowing me off or viewing me like, what are you doing? Why are you throwing away like your career, or, whatever they perceived was my life and what was valuable about my life. So I think that was tough for me, like stepping away from the traditional path, maybe the safe or expected path, and yeah, completely deviating. I'm sure to some people it probably looked like I was having some sort of midlife crisis at the age of like 30. but yeah, I'm glad I did it. It was uncomfortable. It was awkward, to suddenly completely shift careers like that. But again, when you have this sort of driving mission behind it, which I really felt like I did, I felt like I was really purpose driven, and that's what saw me through in terms of fumbling and figuring it out along the way.
Well, and so like amidst figuring it out, like I'm just so curious, like I always love coaching stories of like that moment where you're like, oh my god, I suck at this, and then you just you're like you like unearth this like presence of like, oh, what about, you ask your client, like, what about this or that? And they're like, oh, and then their minds blow, like our minds are blown. Like, was there a moment for you where you just like, you like tapped into that zone of genius where you're like, yeah, like I'm in the groove? Like, was there a moment where you felt like, okay, all the struggle, all the questionable looks from people, like this is the right path?
Oh man, that's a good question. And I'm trying to think of how to approach it, because I feel like there were a lot of times where, since I am a consultant and coach, and some of my coaching sessions can be more, advisory, because I'm helping them, just giving them information. And that's very different from coaching, where you're basically asking questions and holding space, and allowing them to figure out their path themselves in a lot of ways. Figuring out the right balance there was difficult. I think one of the hardest things though is finding your clients, like figuring out who is your ideal client that you really want to work with. And when you find those people, or when they find you, either way, that's really where you shine. That's where it clicks. And I don't actually attribute it to me. Like, as you know, I've gotten a lot of certifications. I've done a lot of work, obviously, and I care deeply about being the best coach I possibly can, which honestly goes a lot to self-care and things outside of just studying and preparing. But I actually think it has more to do with the dynamic between the person and you. So I've had clients, especially earlier on, who would come to me and maybe want something from me that wasn't really the value that I was looking to provide, but I didn't know that yet because I was so early on. And I was just looking to help them, help them with whatever problem they were facing. So it took some practice and trial and error for me to figure out, where can I be of the most value, and where do I want to say, you know what, I don't want to handle this. Like this problem here, that's something I want to outsource to a therapist or to a family law attorney. Those sorts of problems are very important, but I don't want to own them. That is something that I am going to put outside my lane and refer to another professional. So that's been a journey in and of itself, learning what other professionals exist, what are their zones of genius, where can I leverage them best, but also what do I want to take on? What do I enjoy working on with clients? Where can I be of most value and benefit based on my skill set and my background and experience? That's really been, I think, more the process for me, that has helped to have so many, like I've at this point, I'm blessed with so many amazing clients who are just the perfect fit for me, and vice versa, I think. I hope.
Isn't that the best, when you're just like, you're working with your people, and
It's fantastic.
they found you, and that's a very empowered way of really breaking down like how to discover yourself as a coach.
Right.
In addition to the divorce work you're doing, that is just, everything you said is so true of all coaching. Like, if someone is watching this and you're drawn to, you're called to coach, like literally just spend the time on doing that. So many coaches I find are, they spend all this time learning marketing and web design and emails and all that shit. And it's like, just sit with yourself and go, like, what do I really love doing? Like, what is it that I'm like not interested in doing in terms of coaching, right? I always say, like, it's not Chinese food and hamburgers, like, in the same restaurant. It's like, you can't, like, find your lane, and then just, that's when, like, everyone will discover you, for sure. And it happens every time.
Yeah. No, it's so true, because then all you have to do is authentically be yourself. Once you're in your own lane, you just speak to what you're passionate about, speak to what you know, and your people find you, because either they resonate with what you're saying or they don't. And so it's self-selection. And the marketing kind of works for itself, at least in that way.
It's so true. Like the other day we were walking, I said this in like a previous show, but we were walking, and the three of us, and then my co-parent, my daughter, and I made a comment about, I was like, oh, Carrie, like, you should buy a house, like 2 houses, and then I'll rent from you next door. And I was like, I'll live there with my ladies, like I said, jokingly. And my daughter's like, and so we're all joking. And then my daughter gets real serious, and she's like, I don't want you to leave. I was like, oh shit, like, we're going to do this right now? Like, oh my God, I'm sorry, babe. And I'm like, I don't want to leave either. What do I say? But like, okay, whatever. I'm like, so we had the discussion and everything, and she, and her argument, and not argument, but I was like, well, what is it that you're afraid will happen? And she's like, I'm not going to see you because you're on calls all day. And she said something like, you're working all day. And I was like, oh, like, I had to, because she's home, right? Because of like Corona. And I'm like, oh, do I work all day? Like, is that, like, I didn't even think about that. I'm like, it's like, it doesn't feel like work, because it's like you said, like, I just show up authentically, and I'm playing with people, and I'm like, and we're telling stories, and a lot of people are inviting me to help them with books, and like, I've read maybe like 7 books in my life, but like, so it's conversations, and it's really cool. But I was like, oh wow, like, she really perceives me as like working, like. So, but you're right. Like, when you tap into that place where you're just doing the thing, like, you're just in your zone of genius, like, it's just, it finds you, the experiences find you in the way to, this is a beautiful way. So, like, let me finish that thought. I got excited about the next question. You did a great job, Kim, of explaining exactly how to, like, free yourself up to accept better opportunities. Dare I say, is that what you do? Is that in your process? Like, when you are working with clients, like, do you help free them up to experience new opportunities, or what's your jam? Like, how do you do this? Because it sounds emotional.
When you say that, do you mean in terms of like career or work, or what? Can you say more on that? Like, what you're getting at with that question?
Kim, I like, as I dropped the question, I like high-fived myself, because I thought it was so fluid that it came out of that thing.
Sorry.
And that comes out of insecurity, because I was like, I don't know that I made that work after the Stan Lee thing, because I wanted to talk more with you about like your like how much you love comics.
Uh-huh.
But no, you're absolutely right. It's a point. I was like, yeah, I guess I was just like, no, that was kind of specifically going. I guess the answer is specifically about identity, right? If
Yeah.
we're saying that like the thread here is like that loss of identity, do you
Hmm.
have people embrace more opportunities that help fill them with joy, that they're able to like maybe there's a feeling of victim, or maybe there's a feeling of, like you said, huge loss and
Yeah.
failure. The word I want to say, not victim, but failure. There's a feeling
Hmm.
of failure. Do you help them like shift the lens so that they are more open to successful opportunities?
I love to shift the lens in terms of reframing, in terms of offering up, as I was with you, just offering up other narratives, other stories that might also be just as true, if not more true. And it's about choosing, like that you have a role to play in this if you want to take it. Like if you want to kind of pick up that responsibility, you get to choose how you're viewing the world, how you're viewing your opportunities, how you're viewing your life and framing it, which can be daunting to people. That can be intimidating because, again, it's responsibility. But that said, it's also so empowering when you can step into that. So I love to help them reframe that, help them see, what are the options on the table, what excites them, like tapping into just getting really honest. Because sometimes people, they don't want to maybe admit that they hate their job or that it doesn't light them up anymore. But talking that through and figuring out what gives you joy on a daily basis, and also giving yourself permission to change, because we all change, and things that maybe lit us up 5 years ago might not light us up anymore, or there might be some shifts you can make, little pivots that really bring you so much more joy. So it's a process of self-discovery, but I'm kind of there helping along, like holding your hand as you are going down the path, and maybe pointing things out for you that you might not otherwise see, maybe giving you a different lens to look through. But it's definitely a journey, a process. And that's why coaching, you can't just do a one-off session and really benefit from coaching. Like you really need to, it's a journey, and it takes some time and some work kind of on both ends.
And like along that line, like this is kind of like the last question I'll ask you is like, what what are some of the successes, like the big successes that you've seen? If you like, obviously don't say names and stuff, but like,
Yeah.
right, like what are some of the big benchmarks that you've seen people achieve? And
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, I've been really impressed, honestly, by so many of my clients. One that immediately comes to mind. She had been in a very difficult situation in her marriage. There was domestic violence, so there was abuse going on. She had a young son, and she was fearful for him and his safety as well as her own. And she managed to have the courage to get herself out of that situation. I worked with her to move her forward through the divorce process, and her her life, she is just transformed in the most miraculous, beautiful way. It's totally the caterpillar to butterfly, and that isn't to disparage her before. But she just has come out of her cocoon in such a gorgeous way, and now she's writing a book. She's literally finishing up a book that she's written. She's doing speaking engagements to help others who are stuck in situations of domestic violence and abuse, to help them see it for what it is, spot the warning signs, and get out when they can. She is just such a beacon, a light, for so many people, and so inspirational, and yet so humble, in terms of giving credit, and yeah, and not putting herself on any sort of pedestal. And so I admire that so much. And that's just one story, but I mean, people, and she's actually going to become a coach, which is also beautiful, to really focus on that subset of, single moms, and helping people through that process. And yeah, there's so many amazing stories like that, but, it's so gratifying and so fulfilling to me to be able to work with someone who I'm meeting at the absolute lowest point of their life, just horrific stories. The things that I see in here, they bring me to tears. And to see the transformation and what's possible It gives my life so much meaning, and I'm so touched and blessed that I get to actually, be of service in this way to these people. I just feel so lucky that I get to be a part of their lives and helping them in that whole process to come to their ultimate, purpose. It's beautiful.
Dude, you're beautiful. Like, it's so cool to see how sincere, like, it radiates in your eyes. Like, it's like, you're not just a coach because, like, again, you had a lot of great, like, you could have, if you were money driven or successor, like, really cool to see how authentically motivated you are to help. And I have to reflect back to you, man. I have to mirror back to you. Like, thank you so much for doing what you do, because you are giving, you are giving space to people to succeed and to grow and to advance and not just be broken by this thing and not be devastated. So, like, you're amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this.
No,
Yeah.
thanks. I appreciate that.
Like, yeah, like, people benefit by work. Like, so I have to say, like, I've recently, I've been doing a lot of clearing and, like, figuring stuff out. And I have this, like, I don't know if I talked about it in the last show, but with this is like I'm doing like a relationship like series here where I had a relationship coach on before, and then now have you on. It's really cool. So, like, I have this vision of, and I don't remember if I talked to the person before we recorded or if it was during the recording, but I have this vision of my next girlfriend. Like, I'm not a big dater. That's not something I'm into. And I don't think anyone is sitting there going, oh, that sucks. Like, no one's like, damn, Robert Joseph's not a big dater. Like, there goes my social. Like, no one, I don't think anyone's invested like that. But I'm not a big dater. So I'm like, okay, like, when I find her, I'm like, she's a piano player, or, I mean, it might get freaky deaky. She might be a piano teacher. This is my, I'm looking inside. I found. And so once I meet her, I feel like we're good. Like, we're set. So I'm like, that being said, I don't see another divorce happening. But if there was, I would run, not walk, to work with you. That's a long
well, thanks.
You're like, wait,
I know.
How do we get to that run?
I always say to people, I hope that we never have to work together. but if you need me, I'm there. That's definitely, my role.
And how do people get a hold of you? What's the best way to connect with you?
I mean, definitely feel free to reach out. I'm on Instagram at navigating_the_knot, KNOT. Have a Facebook page as well. But yeah, I offer free initial consultations. So there's always, no risk to just book a free consult with me. I think my booking link's on my various business pages. But you can also email me at kim@navigatingtheknot.com. Yeah, just reach out. Just let me know, shoot me a message, whatever it is. It doesn't need to be super formal or anything. But yeah, I'm here, to answer questions, to be a resource. My passion is just educating others, empowering others, and letting you know what I think you deserve to know. And so, yeah, with that said, like, please don't feel like you can always reach out to me.
And you are so experienced. Like, it really sounds like you've seen it all. Like, you've seen the gamut of kids, not
I've
kids.
seen a lot. I don't know if I've seen it all, but I've seen a lot.
Let's hope you've seen it all, right? Like,
yeah.
What you described, I'm like, okay, let's hope it's all. But I'm sure there's craziness out there. Kim, you are marvelous. Thank you so much. Like I said, thank you for doing the work you're doing. Just talking to you is like positive. So yeah, people might be at risk. You said there's no risk. I'm not negating what you're saying, or undermining, but like, you're like, there's no risk. Yeah, there's a risk of you might feel better.
I guess, yeah, hopefully that would be the goal. Yeah, or at least, you'd have some answers or some references or, yeah, some more information one way or the other. But, facing a divorce is hard. And sometimes, honestly, I get it. People sometimes want to avoid reaching out because they don't want to start taking action because once it becomes more real, and that can be tough. So I get that. Like, I get that sometimes it can actually be hard to reach out just because you're afraid of taking that first step. And yeah, I'd love to be of support however I can whenever you're ready, like, without pushing anyone. Again, it has to be at your own pace.
I love you said that. Like, finally, I would say, like, yeah, like, that's what I really heard today is that, again, like, contacting you that's not the nail in the coffin. right? Like it's not like,
No.
oh, I'm going to do this divorce.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I'm again a resource that hopefully can be leveraged, if you need me. But again, I'm not pushing you in any certain direction. If anything, I'm just trying to arm you with knowledge so you can make the right decision that's best for you. And that is not the same decision that's best for anybody else. That's very unique to you. And so, yeah, it's a process.
Kim, I'm in the process of saying that you are the shit. You are awesome. You are the bestest. That didn't sound as good. I was like, the shit. That didn't do credit. Like you are you're like too good to be. Like you are the best. So thank you so much for your time today. Contact
Thank
Kim.
you. It was great to chat with you. Appreciate having the opportunity just to take this time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you. And I thank you for helping me work through a lot of my stuff.
Of course. Yeah, no problem.
All right. Perfect. All right. We'll end it here. Cool. Good job, Kim.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.